To many Americans, gender is assumed and taken for granted. It seems natural and not a source of real concern, but it becomes clear that there is much more depth to the implications of gender on individuals and society as a whole. In fact, our understanding of the construction of gender is quite damaging to everyone. Let us explain.
First, it's important to understand how gender and sex in America work. When you are born, someone will look at your genitals and decide which sex category you belong to. If you have a penis, you're assigned male. Conversely, if you have a vagina, you're assigned female. That is it, it's either or. And by doing this, it really amplifies the oppositeness and differences between the two. How is this damaging? Because the human body is not exactly as opposite as society suggests it is. Take the 1.7% of individuals who are considered intersex, and that they cannot be easily defined as male or female at birth. So what happens to them? These people are being hurt in the most literal sense possible, in that their, quote, unacceptable genitals are being surgically modified to be, quote, acceptable, to typically resemble that of a female's vagina.
These facts about intersex people show the reasons why the ideas of sex and gender need to be challenged. Challenging these norms lessen the pressure doctors feel to alter genitalia. It also lessens the pressure parents feel to make a decision that only their child should make. Gender needs to be challenged so parents of intersex children can be confident in the well-being of their child. As we will discuss, gender is not a fact, so it can be challenged in many possible ways. This analogy of the genderbread person shows the true diversity of humanity in terms of gender and sex. Knowing this diversity can help us to challenge norms that seem undeniably true and can cause harm. Preventing the questioning of one's personhood is why understanding gender diversity is important. The infographic shows how gender identity, gender expression, and sex are fluid things and are not necessarily dependent on each other.
Running parallel to sex is the socially constructed concept of gender, and that the way we display our gender, which does not necessarily have to match up with our sex, builds the basis for hurting all people in society. Men are socialized and made out to be dangerous, have a lack of emotion, and be heterosexual beings that are always seeking out penetrative sex with women. Women, quite oppositely, are socialized and taught to be vulnerable, have too much emotion, and serve as decorative objects that are meant to be penetrated by men. This oppositeness makes gender inequality inevitable. Take parenthood, for example. Generically put, in a traditional nuclear family, men are meant to be the breadwinners that supply for the family, while women remain at home to be the caregiver of the children.
This is another instance of why gender needs to be challenged. It affects the economy and the well-being of working families. When either parent feels they need to be a sole breadwinner, it puts more pressure on one to work and the other to do the actual parenting. Rather than believing that men are breadwinners and women are mothers, a better balance of each of these roles will make the workplace and home life more balanced for everybody.
It is also worth looking at how masculinity in men, especially during the adolescent years, is damaging. When teenagers have sex, it's observed that adolescent boys will engage in locker room talk to discuss the encounter. It's very emotionless. Behind closed doors and in interviews, however, the tone of the discussion changes, and that these boys will actually express caring and heartfelt emotions toward their partners. Not only does this objectification of women hurt women, it also teaches adolescent boys to bottle in their true feelings about others. It's also worth examining how different races experience adolescence and childhood differently, especially in the cases of white and black boys. Boys in general are raised to be rowdy and rambunctious, yet these behaviors are perceived differently in black students than in white. Black students are framed that their defiant, boy-like behavior is dangerous or criminal-like, whereas white student doing the same thing is just seen as being normal. Perhaps the most significant way that our system of gender hurts everyone is through rape. Simply put, rape is made possible by our understanding of gender and the characteristics of being a man and woman we've been talking about. Women are socialized to always be in fear of assault and taught to practice particular strategies to make themselves safe from other men who could potentially rape them. This also makes rape seem like an inevitable part of a woman's life. It's simply a way of living.
As we've discussed, challenging norms is the most effective way to prevent the harm caused by beliefs about gender. This chart shows the normalization of behaviors that can lead to rape. The common response to rape now is to deal with it after. This chart shows how waiting until rape has happened ignores the many behaviors and beliefs that cause it. There are some key responses to rape and rape culture. The major solutions are the work people can do to challenge the commonly held ideas about how rape happens. Currently, rape is viewed from a male perspective. It comes from dominantly male legislators and public figures that create a discourse on rape that frames women as inherently vulnerable. A clear example of this issue is the case of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, someone who expressed with great detail and vanity the extent of her sexual assault. The Senate Judiciary Committee who interrogated her consisted of mostly white men. If this committee and our legislature as a whole better represented people like Dr. Ford, we would have the medium to create a feminist discourse on sexual assault. More than starting a discourse, actual laws be created that better serve the citizenry of the United States.